All right, everybody, we are live again. This is actually round two, trying to do this chat this evening. I've talked a couple of times. You guys have looked at our previous Saturday Q&As about the difficulty of trying to, operate a company at this level, and I think the experience tonight was actually pretty good for being able to illustrate just how difficult the stuff that we're trying to do is. When you don't have huge amounts of funding and things of that nature, then you're basically trying to operate off of individual equipment. We don't have standardized equipment. You are utilizing a lot of free cloud-based services, which are prone to delay. And so this is what it's like when you have a small company. And webcomics, by and large, are mostly small companies. So to those of you, I know we've got some people out there who are trying to emulate what we do. I have to say, it's if you have never actually believed, understood what we talked about before about how hard this is. Again, I hope this video gives you a bit of an understanding of just how difficult it is. It's very tough to try to link everything together when you've got the sort of creators that we have, literally from all over the world. Or even just trying to do simple chats with the people we have tonight. That being said, I'm happy to have this conversation. We're going to try to squeeze a lot here within an hour. This is a Saturday Q&A, which is a normal video series that we do. You can find our YouTube channel if you just Google Saturday AM and YouTube. And but this is the sort of series that we cover mainly when we talk to other webcomic creators or digital artists. We are a digital manga anthology magazine and website focused on creating the next big series like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or Dragon Ball Z via amateur creators from around the world. So we're big proponents of diversity. If you look on the screen here, you can see our top 4 series that currently run inside of our digital magazine. The series on the left, Saigami with the young girl, is from a female creator out of Hungary, which is not something we normally hear about. The creation behind her is a gentleman with a green vest on from a comic called Bully Eater, which is from an African American. On the other side of the Saturday M logo is a gentleman wearing kind of a Tommy Bahama shirt. He is a Latino character, and he is from a series called Islanders by a Cuban expatriate named Leonardo Massa. And last but not least, our biggest series, Apple Black, is as good as anything you'll see out of Japan. And that is from a gentleman from Nigeria, from the continent of Africa, which is something that I don't think anyone would ever think if they saw this artwork. And so we're extremely proud of what we've been able to generate in terms of creating manga, webcomic material that both feature ethnic characters and come from a diverse opinion of creators from around the world. So we're pretty ecstatic about that, and that is kind of what we're all about. I'll talk a little bit more about our business and about how you can participate with supporting us and supporting independent creators. But in the meantime, let's get into this particular conversation, which the entire theme is about the question of manga itself and the notion of who and what constitutes manga. Is it strictly Japanese or from Asian territories like Korea or Thailand or even parts of India? Or is it Western? Is it something that includes countries like America and the United Kingdom and even Latin America, where we're starting to see a greater penetration of original manga-type content created by individuals from those places? This is a debate that is having a bit of a concern to some people because, Saturday AM started as a manga webcomic anthology, and we had a lot of people who asked why we were calling ourselves manga. So again, we're going to talk about that. We've got 2 guests on to talk about that with. We're going to run through introductions very quickly. First up is Sinclair Gray. Sinclair, tell everybody, a bit about yourself and what you're working on. Are you a webcomic creator, things like that?
I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Sinclair Gray. I am the creator of I Heart Genie. Due to a rating, if you know where to find it, you can go ahead and read it. If you don't know where to find it, you're probably too young. So I'm sorry. I also go by Sketching Hands on YouTube, where I teach you basic logos, pretty much how to draw whatever you need to from basic steps if you're a beginner to the intermediate stage.
Okay. All right. And then we have Tanibus Draws. Tanibus, you can his image is there with the fox on the image there. And Tanibus, tell everybody about you.
Hello guys, my pen name's Tanabas Draws. My real name is Stephen L. Cade, and I am an amateur comic book artist, comic/manga artist. My current project is Phoenix Fox and Phoenix, and that's my current project. I have a YouTube channel called Tanabas Draws at youtube.com.
Okay. And so, what I'll say real quickly, guys, we have a list of things we're going to get to. But if you are someone viewing this video and you have questions for myself or for the gentleman that we have here with us on this particular chat, feel free to ask those questions. You got 4 ways you can do it. The first way is if you follow us on Facebook. We have a very fun Facebook fan community. That is at address www.facebook.com/Saturday AM. That's all one word. You go there, you can post a comment, and we'll see that. Likewise, if you post that comment on our private Facebook group, which is the community that we have for serious amateur webcomic creators, this is where these two gentlemen are from, is PILOT Manga. If you are part of that group, you can post a question there. We'll see it, and we'll respond to those questions. Number 3, if you're utilizing Chromebook and you have access to the Chromebook or Google Chrome operating or browser, if you're using Hangout there is a Q&A function where you can actually post a question, and it'll pop up immediately to everyone who's on this discussion. And lastly, if you're on our website, www.saturday-am.com/forum, that you can post a comment to the forum, and again, it'll be something that we see immediately and can act on. So again, there's a couple of methods to reach us for questions. I'm sure that lots of people have lots of opinions as it relates to manga, so we're just going to get right into it. I think when the last video died out on us, one of the things that had come up, I heard you guys chatting about, was how you discovered manga. Let's start with that, and again, let's keep be very responsible with time. Tanabas, when and where did you first discover manga?
Well, funnily enough, my first manga was Love Hina by Ken Akamatsu, and I remember actually seeing it while exploring a small independent bookstore by a mall. I got hooked on Love Hina, and from there I just decided to keep going. And from after that, I discovered Ranma, and I fell in love with manga ever since.
Okay, and so how long ago was that? How old were you when you discovered it?
It was about 14 years old.
14, okay. And then, so Sinclair, what about you? When did you first discover manga?
My story is exactly the same, except that when I saw Love Hina, what captured me was the first chapter. I just simply opened it up and saw him in a situation I'd never seen in comics, and I quickly bought it and had to hide it in my backpack because I was 14 and this was on a school field trip. But after reading it, I decided this is how I'm going to draw my comics for the rest of my life.
So what I find for 2 things that are interesting there, because both you gentlemen, I take it, are in your 20s, right? Mid-20s or so?
I just celebrated my 26th birthday in June.
Okay, and what about you, Tanabas?
I'm currently 23.
23, right. So you guys definitely are part of this more modern manga generation. And again, what's interesting about that is that you guys discovered manga, and some of the manga that you first fell in love with or discovered that really got you into manga appears to be in the realm of kind of like the that's not the action-oriented manga. It's like Love Hina, and I think you said Rama Half, which is skirts shoujo and shonen a little bit. But so you guys kind of discovered it from that standpoint.
Yes, well, I consider Love Hina my first manga because that's when I realized what manga was. But now, as I think about it, I was reading Pokemon manga and didn't realize it because the images were flipped over and they read like a regular comic book. So that's what I thought it was.
Right.
In my case, Love Hina was indeed my first manga. I remember my third manga was actually a copy of Shonen Jump. And I remember my mom, she actually bought it for me because 1, it was cheap, and 2, it had a lot of content. And I remember one of the first pages I saw was a Chihiro Oda One Piece, and I was slightly confused on why there was no tones and or colors.
So interesting. So you got I think in the case of you both, then it sounds like you discovered manga, love Hina, and or Pokemon. So again, still that modern generation. I would say circa
Hmm.
late '90s, early 2000s.
Indeed, yes.
Right.
Yeah, from '99 onward, yes.
Right. And so why did manga, and Sinclair, you kind of hinted at this. I would like you to explain a little bit. Why did manga capture you versus, I mean, both of you, and let me rephrase, I don't know where Tanner was, I'm not sure where you're from, but Sinclair, you're obviously from America. Like, where did you garner the aspect or the majesty of manga in relationship to the fact that you were surrounded by, as a young kid, you may have been reading Pokemon and come to realize that was manga, but you certainly were aware of Superman, Batman, X-Men, yada yada. Particularly in the '90s, you were. So, why did manga grab you versus regular American comics?
I would have to say is how the characters did everyday situations. Because if you look at Superman and Batman comics, they're always either eating, fighting, planning, planning the save the world or planning the defeat the villain. And with
Hmm.
manga, it's oh, you see someone using the bathroom, drinking a cup of water, going to sleep. I'm like, you can do that with comics. I'm like, it never occurred to me you could do that because the only thing I would see someone sitting down would might be like in a Garfield comic or whatever. That's all America basically had at that point. So you think either had to be a superhero or a gag because all the romance, the horror not comics, all those died off in I would believe the 60s and 70s. So I never
Mhm.
saw that.
So that's interesting. Okay, so it was kind of the circumstances of regular manga that appealed to you. And so, what about you, Tanner? First of all, where are you from? Then, and how did manga grab you separate from other comic books that surely were around?
Well, I grew up in the Caribbean, specifically the
Okay.
Latin Caribbean, Puerto Rico specifically.
Uh-huh.
But the problem is, at least where I grew up, manga was a lot more accessible than American comics. I don't remember ever holding an American style comic book before I ever was exposed to manga.
Uh-huh.
And the thing with manga is that one, like I said, I was 14 at the time, and manga at that age, I was considering the hormones. I was attracted to manga because it had some attractive characters.
Hmm. So, so Wonder Woman or Psylocke from X-Men or some of those characters didn't necessarily grab you. You saw those comic books, but manga, something about that titillated you in terms of the look of the characters.
That the thing is about American comic books is that it wasn't very accessible where I grew
Hmm.
up.
Okay, so manga was more accessible
It was
than
a lot,
American comics.
it was a lot more accessible because manga I can literally go to a supermarket, I can go to the equivalent of a Publix and find a Shonen Jump copy there. But to acquire American style comic books, your Supermans, your Batmans, your Spider-Man, I would need to enter one of the military bases.
I see. That's interesting. That's actually quite fascinating because Shonen Jump obviously no longer exists in a physical format, at least in the Western world. But at the time, yeah, it was one of the few, alongside of things like Archie, comic books that you could find like in your local grocery store and places like that. So that's actually very interesting. Um, all right. So then, obviously, you guys are aware, and in that generation, you guys were in also. And I've got to remember in the case of Love Hina, but I think that was published by Tokyo Pop. Am I mistaken, or was that published by Viz?
Yes, I have first editions, and the first editions have Tokyo Pop on it, and then the second editions was I cannot remember the name of the company,
It'd probably
but
Viz.
they have like a little emblem for after he won the 2002 Best Manga Award, and they do not have Tokyo Pop on there.
Okay. Well, the reason, so I know Tokyo Pop as a company. In fact, they're actually coming back into business. They went out of business for a while. But one thing that's curious to me about that, so Tokyo Pop, in the period that you discovered Love Hina, Tokyo Pop actually was one of the few places, was one of the places, frankly, that launched the modern what do you call it? OEL, original English language manga. Like Tokyo Pop was the place where Americans or people from the West could create manga and have it published and treat it like it was manga. So Tokyo Pop actually is a very interesting aspect here. That was in the period you guys discovered manga, and so I'm curious to know, have you got, how do you guys feel about manga? First of all, did you know that? And likewise, how did you come to feel about manga being dubbed OEL in terms of for original English language versus traditional Japanese manga? Did you ever notice a difference between English manga and Eastern manga, was it just something that you were like, well, manga's manga, or Japanese manga is true manga? Like, how did you come to understand there was a difference in manga?
Would you like to go first, St. Clair?
Well, I didn't. Okay, I only paid attention to manga enough I would say about half the time, because I was still, into Superman and all the American ones. Now the whole original English language, it carried a stigma. So to me, being an artist, I considered it, okay, this is still manga. This person it's in English. So to me, it was the same. But back then, I would have to fight to get people to recognize that. And it was due to, before Tokyo Pop decided we're not going to flip the comics over anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the term fake manga came, because you have some artists, they'll make a comic based in Japan and mimic the Japanese artists.
Mm-hmm.
So that's would be considered fake manga. So if I find out your name was, we'll say, Brian Jones, and you were a black or a white guy, and you never lived in Japan, and you're not Japanese, and you're trying to tell a Japanese story in Japan, to me that would be fake, because you're not being yourself.
So, Tandem, how do you feel about that, and how did you come across? Did you ever notice there was a distinction between Western created manga and Eastern created manga?
Well, I found out about the difference much later in my life, namely only a few years ago, because when I grew up during the time of the Tokyo Pop boom, I didn't have any access to any internet, so I would just rely on the bookstores, like namely Borders, and the main company that I would see, at least where I grew up, would be Tokyo Pop. So I had no idea what was the difference between a traditional manga and OEL.
Mm-hmm.
But now that, I'm sorry, what were you about to say?
No, I said
I would say the turning point for me in realizing there was a difference, I was reading a comic called Sakura Refugees, and it was online. And all of a sudden, it was no longer going to be online. And then I saw it underneath a Tokyo Pop emblem. And then I'm like, oh, okay. So I can do this if I wanted to. And I'm looking at the feedback, and even Japanese people were like, oh yeah, this is a great manga. So I said, okay, so manga isn't just a Japanese person doing it. It's this art. This is own style, or is this version of art, like how there's difference between realism and impressionism.
Mm-hmm. So I think, so first of all, let's say that, number one, manga, of course, the term is Japanese. For those people who are watching this and maybe not as tied into this. Number two, the term simply means comics. So I've always kind of had a bit of an issue. I'm much older than both of you, but I've always had an issue personally with the notion that there's a separation of manga, because there is no separation of manga. Manga is comics. The comic industry was created in the West. Manga adopted a Western creation, the Japanese, and they created their own style of it, much like anime is their own style of animated movies and so forth, of Disney. But at the end of the day, it's just comics. It's just comics. Now, there is a style and a culture associated with manga that certainly is 100% accurate, but I feel like to try to argue the differences of manga in terms of what makes it unique versus Western comics, I think is stretching. I think that manga is manga, and so that's why for us, we've never tried to have a distinction in our content. We create manga webcomics. It's that simple. But I will say, to what you both say, and as someone who's actually been to Japan, that the Japanese do absolutely have, or at least not all Japanese, obviously, nothing is completely 100%, but there is a bit of a stigma from Japanese creators and fans to the idea of Western created manga. In other words, they would be far more acceptable of a traditional American comic book than they would of an American comic book that features manga style artwork. But again, that's a particular viewpoint. That's not a uniform viewpoint of people in Japan, and so there you go. But so I mean, any comments or questions to that, or
you go ahead.
You go ahead, Sinclair. I'll go second.
I was reading a book. It was called The Princess of Tennis, and she worked on The Prince of Tennis, the sequel.
Correct.
This is a 7-foot redheaded white girl from Washington State.
Mm-hmm.
So, in one chapter, they're being interviewed by a TV crew, and they thought she was the wife to the creator, and they were like, "Oh, you draw manga? You can do that? Oh my gosh, you speak Japanese?" Mm-hmm. And over there, they only see Japanese people. They only speak to other Japanese people. I would say 90 to 95% of them. Mm-hmm. So it's not a racist thing. It's more of a cultural thing. They don't really, unless they see someone else do it, they won't be susceptible to it.
Well, that's not true. But let me Chambers, come back to what were you going to say?
Who, me?
Yeah, were you going to say something? Or?
Yeah. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I watch a lot of videos concerning the same topic. And the thing, just the stigma that, one, you need to be Japanese to produce manga, and two, you need to not only be Japanese but also write the manga in the language and produce it in Japan is a bit redundant in my opinion. By this point, manga has become a global property.
Correct. Yeah, that's correct. Let me touch on both of those things. So number one, to Sinclair's point, so I'm not. I think that's part of the problem that exists online is that you read one piece of information and you're basing a theory off of that, and that's not reality. Let me say again, I've been to Japan. I've been to Asia multiple times. Now, number one, let me correct a couple of things you said. Number one, Japan absolutely has a race issue. That's just ridiculous. Of course they do. And I was an exchange student in Japan, and I was 15 when I first went to Japan. So, let's be clear, they have it. I mean, I had a wonderful time. They love black people, but they're a homogeneous society. If you actually study and look at the manga, you see some of the issues that go on in manga. I talk about this all the time. I talk about this in PILOT Manga. I talk about this in the videos that we make, but I become more and more troubled when I look at manga today, and it's one of the reasons I started my footprint and started Saturday AM, because I become more and more troubled at the idea that the Japanese manga creators live in such a closed world that they are unable to create characters that are people of color. They don't even create characters who are Korean, which is a sizable ethnic minority inside of Japan, or Chinese. I mean, they have more Chinese than not, but certainly you don't see any black people, you don't see any Latino people, and so this is a problem. Let's not sugarcoat that. That's a problem, and that's not based on anything other than it's not based on the fact that we don't see people of color. That's ridiculous. I went to Japan. The first time I went to Japan was in 1989, I want to say.
I was a baby.
CNC Music Factory was hot on the radio. The biggest movie star in Japan was Eddie Murphy. Nike Air Jordans were the hottest shoe that you could buy if you had money. So let's be clear. They know black culture. Anybody who tells you they don't know black culture, they don't know what they're talking about. They know black culture. They love black culture. So this is about the manga creators and what the manga creators value. And what they're valuing is maybe they're like, and I don't know this to be true, but I certainly theorize that a lot of manga creators are as geeky and nerdy as a lot of comic book creators. So, we have an issue in America where Marvel is now and DC now are going out of their way to create more ethnic characters because for 70 some years they didn't. They hired people who looked like them, mostly fat white, not, they don't say it like that, but mostly older, kind of socially inept white guys, and that's what they created. That was the comic books they created. And we loved them. We grew up with them. I loved them. Grew up with them. I knew a lot of comic creators, but that's the reality. They're not jumping over backwards to create ethnic-looking characters today because they did a bang-up job 15 years ago. They're doing it because they never did it. And in the case of Japan, if we make the assumption that many of the mangaka are similar to a lot of the creators here in America, ergo, you get a lot of concepts that are very homogeneous. But the challenge and the concern I have, just to tighten this up before we move on, is that what we see from Japan are characters who don't even look Japanese, and that's the problem I have. So they placed a value judgment on looking like white characters, which the byproduct of that was that the stuff sold very well into Western markets. You create a Naruto, which is a blue-eyed, blonde-haired kid, and guess what? That's going to sell into places like the United Kingdom and France and Spain and Italy and America. That's going to sell very well, even though, it's about a Japanese kid. So these are the sort of things that go on there, but it's absolutely not the case that they don't know anything about black culture, and it's not the case that they, they don't have issues with race. They do, not all of them, but there was a story just recently, if you guys pay attention to the news or Google, where the Miss Japan is a biracial. They call it haifu. She's a biracial woman of color. She's a woman of color.
I saw that.
Yeah, she looks like a black woman, but she's Japanese, and the Japanese were not happy about that. Not let me phrase again. Not all Japanese, but there was a very vocal segment, just like there be in America, of people who were very brave online and were very against the fact of this girl representing Japan. So there is an issue there, and it's why we started Saturday AM. But again, let's be clear that that issue should in no way impact the notion of manga existing from creators who are from the West or from other parts of the world. It should not serve as a deterrent from other creators creating manga, because what is manga? That's like saying, in other words, does anyone here get upset if you see a comic book from France that's called a comic book? It features French creators or French, well, there you go. Shouldn't be the case with Japan either, I don't think. Any thoughts or ideas to that?
Yeah.
Well, okay, you go ahead this time.
Sorry, Sinclair. I'm not sure if you guys remember, right? At least during the late 90s and early 2000s, right? There was the same stigma that we get now, that everything from Japan, if it's manga or anime, is somehow superior to Western style media.
Absolutely, yes.
That's absolutely wrong. And people who think that, to me, are ignorant, and you're usually in just a fan community. If no artist would ever believe that. No real artist anyway.
No, I couldn't agree more. But you're right, Cannabis. There was that segment of people who, and there still is a segment of people who only believe, and these are Western people at that. I'll give you a good example. When I started Saturday AM, I remember I was talking to a young creator, and I was asking them about they were a person of color, and I asked them why didn't they have a person of color in their manga, and they made this ridiculous statement to me about, well, it would just seem forced if I had a person of color in a manga, and it's like, really, it's like, why would that seem forced? You are a person of color. Why would it seem forced to have a person of color in manga? And that's that thinking that somehow what the Japanese do in Eastern manga is superior to anything that we would do. So if we were to do it, God forbid we try to do something that speaks of our own culture, our own backgrounds, because that would just make it seem even more inauthentic. And it's just crazy. That's crazy.
What you just said just reminded me of this was back when Apple Black was on Manga Magazine, and before you had picked them up.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to another African American creator about White.
White Manga, the creator of Apple Black.
Yeah. So I looked through White's work, and I'm like, okay, yeah, he's pretty good. I can't wait for it to come out. This is before the first chapter came out. This other creator had said to me, I don't know how true this is, and this was 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
He had said, I had asked White, why don't you draw any black people? And he's like, go look through his stuff. So I looked through his stuff, and I'm like, okay, well, he only has maybe like 10 images of, but there aren't any black people. But I'm like, but I'm gonna withhold judgment until I see his work. So even then, it's like it was like the complete opposite. If let's say White didn't have any colored people in his manga, there would have been a whole he would have felt a backlash from other creators of like, okay, you're from Africa, you don't even have a character that happens to look like you. And I think this was before his he created his avatar too.
Right. So I mean, I don't want to turn this into conversation with White, but I'll say that I mean I've talked to White about this myself, and I know White has added some characters of color to his work, and White is with the story of Apple Black. White is drawing on there's elements of African culture and African mythology that White is actually drawing on for Apple Black. So I think, I'll say what I tell all the creators who work with me or for me, and that's that, they have to do what they feel confident they can accomplish and what they can pull off. But that being said, though, as you just said, rightfully so, Sinclair, because of how much Saturday AM means to people, we get the notes from people, from kids from Venezuela, from Africa, from all over the world, who are like, I can't believe when I went on your website and I saw someone who looked like me and could draw like that. I can't believe that you guys exist. Like, and you can read the note, you can tell the kid is crying, and they're like, you've given me hope that I can pursue my dream. And so I think, for me, I make sure all of our creators understand the responsibility that they have, and at the same time, they have their own crosses to bear. But as you said, Sinclair, in the case of White, he's African. He'll get it if he doesn't do it. He'll get it from Africans, right? He'll get it from people of color. So I think it's important. And the thing I always use, the litmus test I always use about why, and I'll just say this as part of the conversation, that one of the aspects of us creating Saturday AM is that people ask, well, what am I trying to do? I want to beat Shonen Jump. I want to win. I want to knock them the hell off the top of the manga pyramid. And people say, well, why do you want to do that? I'm like, it's not because I dislike them. I love Shonen Jump. It inspired me as a creator. I was reading them when I was very, very young and went to Japan as an exchange student. But let's be clear. I believe that manga can be so much more than what it is.
You sound so much like me, because I sit and I tell other people all the time. I always say I'm gonna own Shonen Jump. They're like, you can't buy it anymore. I'm like, that's not what I mean. I mean, I want to own Shonen Jump, not the magazine, the company itself, because what you just said, the change is coming. The Japanese like it or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's absolutely right. I mean, the things are changing there, and I've been, looking at this over a decade, over 20 years professionally, and I'm confident that we can pull it off. So, I think from that perspective, I think for us, that's what our objective is. But every creator has kind of got to deal with that, because as I talk about those things, then we get more and more fans from around the world. Then they look at all of our creators and they ask, okay, well, why does your series have characters of color? And so that's the kind of the standard I think a lot of our guys, new and old, will have to deal with. But let's, with that being said, let's kind of caveat and move on to, let's talk about webcomics in general and the overall aspect of webcomics. I mean, again, when we started Saturday AM, we really kind of pioneered something with Saturday AM, because, like I said, there are people now trying to do what we did. But before, you just had a website, you created content on a website. And here, we've got a website, we've got a line of webcomics, we have ebooks, we have printed books, and we have a digital magazine like Shonen Jump. And now there are people trying to do what we do. And I think, for me, and no one also is kind of tagging it all around manga. No one's really trying to make it be manga. You had Eight Blazers who had an app but never really had a magazine experience. And I think, for me, the question I want to ask you guys is, what is your relationship to webcomics? When and where have you guys discovered webcomics, and how did you guys determine whether or not that's something you want to pursue? Because I think because I don't know, Sinclair, are you actually publishing anything, or are you still waiting to get something out, or what's your deal?
Well, I tried to get something published with Kodaisho, and the email they sent me was they're not focused on American artists. And
You
then
said
they
Cadantia?
yes.
Cadantia? Okay, got it. Okay,
Shonen
yeah.
Jump said they weren't taking submissions at all.
Right.
So I'm more focused on putting something out for Saturday M, but then also want to put something out for my age group and older. So you're looking at like an 18 plus range. So that would itself have to be somewhere else. You couldn't have R-rated plus material next Apple Black. That's just not going to happen because, like you said, you have kids.
Well, you don't know exactly what we have planned to do, and let's say as well that you can't decide to be a Saturday and you have to submit your stuff like everybody else, but which we have yet to receive your stuff. But I would say that we'll talk about this towards the end of the call, but we actually are going to come up with our first Saturday PM title that we'll be talking about that. That will actually be previewed in issue 29 of Saturday AM, which comes out this coming week. So yeah, we actually are working on more adult content or more seinen type content. But so I guess my question to you is, so you kind of looked at maybe submitting it to magazines. You realize that the traditional Japanese publishers who have American offices are not looking at original content at this moment. And so then we came along. You looked at maybe doing something with us. So you're still working on your concept. Is that right?
I said this to them maybe like 3 months ago just to see what they would say. I was never intending on working for the Japanese companies. I just wanted to see what the entire atmosphere was like.
Okay.
But yeah, like your mindset, my mindset aligns with yours. So if I'm ever going to finish something and submit it, it's going to be to Saturday AM. I'm not looking at the Japanese companies because I'm not the type of artist that they want because of the country I'm born in.
Well, again, I don't want to say that's true. I don't know that to be the case. I just know that to date, the things that you look at factually suggest that there is a bias that the Japanese have. I mean, first of all, as you said, you've read some stuff that's there, and that's true. I've read some stuff that's there too. I've experienced some of these questions. But at the same time, though, I think that there's a question to be had about the Japanese as it relates to Western artists. Or artists from outside of Japan, about how much of it is kind of a naivete as well. Because the Japanese model, and I was there in these discussions when we were talking about maybe trying to digitize manga back in the mid-2000s, and the Japanese were fiercely against that. A lot of Japanese mangaka were against it. They were like, no, this must be printed book. Even though the world knew that digital was where things were going. Comixology got started around that time frame. Apple was taking off with the App Store, and digital song sales had already been a huge business for them. So it was like it was common sense. This is where things were going, especially for a printed book and the Kindle had come out. So this was obvious that this was where manga was going to go. But the Japanese fought it tooth and nail until they had to play catch up. And I'll say this: I've said this before on camera. Scanlations, which I'm sure everyone here knows about scanlation sites, would not exist if the Japanese had gotten off the butts sooner and got on the digital bandwagon and helped create the digital bandwagon for manga. It would not have happened.
Yeah,
it wouldn't have happened. And so the naivete of the Japanese may be behind some of the things that's going on with you. It may not be just, I'm not looking for a Western creator. It may be something literally as silly, I hate to say it like that, but something literally as silly or naive as the idea that, wait a minute, well, if we bring him in, he's not going to know about Japanese culture, and the Japanese audience really wants people who understand Japanese culture, which flies in the face of everything, right? If that's the case, then hip-hop should not be big in Japan. If that's the case, then Marvel superhero movies should not do millions of dollars in Japan. If that's the case, you know what I mean? Everything that we produce that the Japanese love shouldn't work because it's never created with the Japanese culture in mind. So, it's naivete, I think. But again, I can't say it for sure. Tanibus, what about you? What's your introduction to webcomics? Where are you with the whole webcomics thing?
Well, just truth be told, my first introduction. I don't want to get that. First introduction to webcomics was through Manga magazine, right? I remember one of my first webcomics I took a look at was actually maybe Okami, right? And I got interested in that, and I figured out that he's not necessarily, he is Japanese, but he's not necessarily living in Japan, right? And I saw all sorts of fantastic web comic book artists, including white manga. and to know that these guys are not necessarily Asian or Japanese. So I just thought, hey, why not? If they can do it, maybe I can do it too.
Absolutely.
And I just decided to finish my project, to work on my project that I had sidelined for a long time.
Okay. Okay. So you are working. So both of you are working on your projects, your webcomic projects.
Yes, mechs are hard. Well, I wouldn't say hard. They're very time consuming.
Yeah.
Okay, let's just say I'm drawing a Gundam, for instance, which mine isn't that elaborate. It might take you about 7 hours if you want to do everything correct the 1st time.
No, I agree. I agree. Mechs are very hard. That's why you don't see them in webcomics, I think. I mean, there are a lot of webcomic genres that I don't see a lot of, including horror. And I think it's because it's frankly very hard to pull off some of the more complicated things.
Horror kind of died around in the webcomic community in around
Was it ever big?
2004. Yeah, I read horror on what's the website called? Onlinecomics.com. It's gone now. Manga basically wiped that community out as a whole. But yeah, there were a lot of horror comics up until 2005, 2006. It's just it's a dead genre minus zombies at this point.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of horror web comics we saw when we were investigating the category that are still doing well. But regardless, I mean, right? I think. I mean, I'm not sure I'm going to agree with that, but I guess what I'll say here is that I think the problem, and this is again what Saturday was meant to kind of address, is that the webcomic community. I say this a lot. Again, people who watch my videos, it's like the wild, wild west. It's like there's just so much stuff out there. And so, therefore, we can get discussions like this about where horror webcomics at, and no one really knows because it's not like there's a place where you can go and find horror webcomics. When we started this, and we were like, we're going to focus on shonen style webcomic content. Bully Eater was popular, Saigami was popular, Apple Black was popular, but there wasn't a place where you could go and find a lot of like-minded series that focused on exciting adventure kind of storytelling. There just wasn't a place where you could do that, and so. That's one of the reasons why Saturday exists. But so I think a lot of this is just it's really hard. The webcomic community is so unorganized, and stuff is just sitting out there so willy-nilly that it's hard to find the content. But there are some decent horror webcomics out there, but they're independent. I don't know any that exist on a site like Saturday M. But mechs I definitely have never seen. So I think I've seen one. I think it's called E-Death Angel. But yeah, I would love to see what you come up with that. And Tanibus, what are you working on? What sort of concept are you working on? You have to give the whole spiel, but what are you working on?
Right now, I'm working on gender bender called Fox and Phoenix. Basically, not to give the full synopsis. Basically a guy he gets turned into a person of the female gender.
Oh yes.
And he has to turn back into a guy before something horrible happens, which I cannot reveal right now.
Now all of a sudden, because I saw you submitted that last time, and now I see the. I was curious when I saw what you created last time when we were critiquing it, and there was a piece of me that thought I was like, I wonder if he's familiar with like Rama Half and stuff like that, but I didn't know, I wasn't sure.
Yes.
So there we go.
Rama actually is my favorite anime / manga, and that's basically what got me into drawing gender bender manga.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, again, I'm wishing both of you guys luck. We do want to see what you guys come up with when you submit it, and hopefully there's a place for you guys. Our PILOT Manga contest will be coming to a close, I think, in another week or so, and then we'll and that'll be it for 2015 because we're just kind of focused on some other big initiatives that we've got towards the close of the year. So coming back to just overall like webcomics and stuff, do you guys think that webcomics are here to stay? Do you guys think that that there's still a problem with webcomics? Do you think print is going anywhere? Like, what's your overall feeling about the webcomic industry or product?
If I may, I think webcomics is doing a very good job, at least in the concept-wise. Basically, instant content for people can acquire content and read it almost instantly. But
Mhm.
the thing about webcomics that I think caveat or is kind of like not necessarily going in his favor is it's something that you yourself need to look for, right?
Mhm.
It doesn't necessarily have the exposure like let's say how content used to have during the early 2000s, like Pokemon, like I'm showing Jump, that it's not there right in your face all the time. That you actually have to look for webcomics. Is what I'm trying to.
Right. I agree. I think you're right. There is not a good place for discovery of webcomics. There's not a PR machine around webcomics. What about you, Sinclair? What do you think regarding webcomics? How do you feel? How do you see it?
I have to divide it up. So, okay, yes, comics and manga is the same thing, but we'll just separate web comics and web manga for this. When it comes to the older gag web comics, you know, from like
Mm.
you get a strip of wheat, those will either completely die out or you won't be able to really find them. Now, when it comes to web comics in the manga style, pretty much digital is the future. When it comes
Mhm.
to if you live in a rich country like China, America, Japan, or whatever, because print here is gonna die to a certain extent. Now, of course, you're gonna have people who wanna, you know, they want the physical book for nostalgia, for let's say you're the type of person. Well, I want the print version just in case my power goes out and my phone dies, so I can still read manga by candlelight if I want to. Now, if you go to like third world countries, poor countries like the Philippines, Kenya, whatever, print is still gonna be how most people are gonna get their stuff unless they have a cell phone. Then they'll be able to do digital, but
That
it'll.
is, so Claire, I have to give you credit. You are one of the most opinionated people I've ever met, but I don't know how accurate. A lot. First of all, the digital is far cheaper than
Yeah.
paper. Paper is super expensive. So why you think paper would continue to exist in countries where it's more expensive is beyond me. It's probably the opposite of anything. We'll continue to have paper products in America and in bigger countries because people want it and therefore they can afford it. Versus a lot of the other countries, cell phones are quite prodigious. You'd be surprised how far fetched cell phones are. So now whether or not people want to read it on a small screen, I highly doubt that's the case. But digital is easily the most accessible format. That's the reason why Facebook and Google are trying to get internet access into really like sub-Saharan parts of the world, like like the desert and places that just are literally war torn, like over Sudan, I think, or parts of Sudan. So, I mean, I think I get your point, but like I said, I think digital is definitely coming without any halt to it whatsoever. The question is whether or not paper will have any real chance of surviving
And
long term.
I only feel that comics are only you only eventually I think you will only see a comic on paper if you see someone drawing it and they don't have the means to do it digitally or they don't want to do it digitally. The only reason I feel that like
Which,
okay,
like I said, it's super expensive. I mean, paper is very expensive. So let's take you for example. If you decided, and because we have these creators, they contact us all the time, and they're like, "Well, I only want my product to be printed," and we tell them, "Well, you need to go somewhere else because we may love their artwork. We're like, you need to go somewhere else because we do not have the faith in the print comic community being a small company, it's a cannabis point, getting very little coverage in the mainstream. Like Comic Resources doesn't talk about us, stuff like that. Even though they should, but they don't. So we don't. We have such little of that going on that for me to be confident enough in some new artist who's never done anything before to say, "Oh yeah, we're going to print your comic book." Printing is expensive. It is super expensive. It's like you take a huge risk when you print something. So there can be an artist who thinks that way, and I guarantee you, unless they're coming out of pocket for it, they'll be sitting at that Starbucks talking to you about what they plan to do and won't be doing it.
yeah, you're right. The only reason I would say print would survive in poor countries is if it depends on their currency rate. If buying a phone is so expensive that paper is actually cheaper. But it's like you said, Google and the rest of the tech companies are making that push to get cell phones cheaper, to get them out into these little villages to where these people can have internet access to, where eventually digital it'll take over and you won't ever see paper again.
Well, like I said, it has taken over in large parts of the world, and just from the business aspect, I'm telling you that print is very expensive, and only getting more expensive. And so I think digital's there. Now, whether or not digital will succeed with comics, whether or not comics will actually succeed, or video games overtake it, or something like that, is a whole other story. And that is a question that strategically we're thinking about, but no one really knows the answer to that right now. Virtual reality technology is coming along, and who knows what that'll do to comic books and video games and movies and everything else. So who knows? But we're going slight on time here, so let me just finish up and just ask you guys, first of all, are there any questions or any comments you guys think you want to posit to discuss before we call time on this discussion regarding the state of manga, webcomics, things like that?
If I may, where do you see comics in general within the next 20 years? If you were to make an educated guess.
Where do I see it doing what? What do you mean?
I mean, like, just in general, do you think the cultural barriers will kind of like dissipate here to 20 years? Do you think more people will read comics here to 20 years? Do you think?
Yeah, absolutely, of course, absolutely, yeah, totally. I mean, look, I was in the video game industry, like I said, for over a decade, and one of the biggest things that I did not like when I was in the gaming industry was that I kept arguing to a lot of my friends and colleagues that that we were talking to the same people over and over again. The gaming industry was largely supported for a good decade plus off the same group of kids who would frequent their GameStops. They would take their rent money and buy a video game, and then buy a couple of video games, play it to death, take it back to a GameStop, trade it in, and get the next big video game. And they were doing this consistently year on and year out. The gaming industry was not growing; it was just staying stagnant because it was the same 18 to 34-year-old, mostly males, not a lot of females, not a lot of people over the age of 34, not a lot of younger people outside of Nintendo. That's just what it was. Then what happened? You had mobile technology, back to this whole question about mobile and how prolific it is. You had mobile come, and all of a sudden now you had games like Angry Birds that could speak to generations of people, and they weren't concerned about whether or not it was the slickest high-definition 3D graphics. It was just fun, and it was clear to figure out how to play. The control scheme was really simple, and it was inexpensive. And so all of a sudden now you had games like Angry Birds generating $1 billion, and you had more and more people my parents' age, people your parents' age, children, people 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, playing more video games than they ever did on console. So I think that digital is absolutely going to change comic books. The question, as I said before, is whether or not comic books will succeed the way that we read them now. An example I give of that is I currently enjoy Marvel Unlimited. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that service, but it's called Marvel Unlimited, and it's like you pay $10 a month or you pay a flat fee per year, and you get access to over 17,000 Marvel comic books from since day one of Marvel. And as a kid who grew up, and I loved DC over Marvel, but I still was a big fan of some Marvel comics. But the idea that I can go in and just read whatever I want to read any given time on my iPad, I don't have to download the issue. It's just I call it up, it streams the issue to me, and I can literally search catalogs of characters and storylines and creators. That is amazing to me. That is absolutely amazing to me, and that has changed. I would never pay for an individual comic book ever again. So I think when comic books get to the place of using technology to help further their relationship to people who are not the traditional comic book fans, I think it's going to do nothing but continue to rise and get more and more fans, more and more readers. Yeah, absolutely.
I would agree.
So, go ahead, Sinclair. Did you have a question? Go ahead, Santa. Did you have a question, Sinclair?
Well, before all what you said happens, I basically see. It's kind of happening now, where you had like the Western quote unquote manga community, the Japanese quote unquote manga community, and just web comics themselves, like the gags, all merging into one until to the point where everyone's saying, you know what, this is not. There's no American comic industry or Japanese comic industry. It's just the comic book industry, period. Because that's what it's basically going to boil down to. It's like, it's like you said with video games. Those who grew up on Sega versus Nintendo or whatever, the exact same people that you kept talking to, that was quote unquote what a gamer was. But now everyone's a gamer. Everyone plays freaking Candy Crush, except for me, which it seems. So.
No, I don't play it either, but you're 100% right, though. You are 100% right. And I'll do one better as it relates to comic books and the proliferation of comic books. Now, it used to be growing up, of course, right, that you were a fan of Batman because you went and collected the comic books. Nowadays, you can be a fan of Batman, and you could never have read a comic book, but you could have seen the movies. You could be a fan of Batman and never have seen the movies, but you played the video games. You could be a fan of Batman and never played the video games, never seen the movies, never read the comic books, but you've watched the animated TV show. You could have done none of those things, but you could wear T-shirts that have Batman on them. Batman is now a brand, and you can be a fan of the brand in various ways without ever having to actually do the thing that used to be the only thing you could do to say you supported that brand, that character. And everything is like that now. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, X-Men, Akira, everything is like that. So, again, I think comic books, I think are going through a dramatic change, and I think that just like in the video game industry, it's starting to reach more and more people now. But again, the question in the case of webcomics is that it is so incredibly undisciplined right now that the question is who and what and how is the system going to kind of work itself out so that everybody can discover easily and enjoy without any hassle their webcomic of choice and go from there. So that's going to be the real challenge that sits out there. So any last questions? Because we've got about 10 minutes left. I'm going to take a couple of minutes at the end and just close out. But any further questions or comments?
The only comment I have is when it comes to discipline for this, those who can at least pencil a page a day will be the successors of this entire industry from today onward. Those who are lazy and don't try, they'll push out a page a week. They will be known, like, they'll be basically the dinosaurs, in my opinion. I could be completely wrong, but
yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily agree with that, but I certainly agree that, and we talk about this a lot. I bring this up in PILOT Manga a lot to you guys and to all the people who follow us. That I think one of the things that we're very proud of that separates us from everybody is that we do hold our creators to a standard. I mean, there's a group of people we kicked out of Saturday PILOT Manga because they were kind of disruptive and they didn't like the hardline stance that I took about things. And they've now started trying to create their own manga magazine, and good luck to them. Hopefully they pull it off. But one of the things that they're kind of touting with their thing is that there's no deadlines. You can submit whatever you want to submit. And my view of that is really quite clear, and that is that if the world of webcomics doesn't need any more assurances for creators to say, oh, hey, do whatever you want, whenever you want. What it needs is to get to the place where you've got a Batman or a Teenage Mutant Turtles. What it needs is more discipline. And so from that point, I totally agree with Sinclair in the sense that you've got to have some discipline. If you have no discipline, you can absolutely forget succeeding in this space because it's already tough. There's already very little money. Your generation, both of you, your generation, are not used to paying for things. A lot of stuff you guys get on the internet's free. So it's very, very tough. And when I listen to kind of naive statements, it does kind of just amaze me a bit because the reality is that you got to have discipline. I couldn't agree more. With your point there. Go ahead, Tanibus. Any last comment or question for you?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, what can we as creators do to attract a non-otaku fan base, to attract non-otaku readers, and if that is necessary?
Well, yes, it's necessary. Of course, it's necessary because if you're creating, first of all, again, something I say over and over again, all of our PILOT Manga people, is the biggest challenge that they have, and discipline, of course, is one of them, but I think the biggest one is ego. That is the biggest aspect of a lot of webcomic creators that literally cripples them from the very beginning, and I see it so often. And it's something that, you know, if I care, I knock it down, and if I don't care, I let you just run on with your ego. Because the reality is that the belief that you've got it figured out is exactly what kills so many webcomic creators. The reality is that there is no fan who owes you anything. There is no success that is guaranteed to you. The idea that you think you're a good creator isn't the proof of the pudding. We are a capitalist country in America. So if you actually understand capitalism, then guess what? There is no process in which you are guaranteed a damn thing.
Mm-hmm.
The market will show what you're guaranteed. So you can talk all you want to talk, and you can be as whatever you want to be when it comes to your ideas, but at the end of the day, the fan is going to tell you what they think. They're either going to support you financially or do something with you or not. So that's the challenge that sits out there, is ego. We see it. I see it all the time, and it is amazing to me. So this notion, Tanibus, about, oh, well, you know, do we need to get otakus? No, of course not. What you need to get is fans. And so the way you get fans and the way you don't fall victim to ego is you, first of all, accept the fact that your first objective is to entertain people. If you are creating a piece of content, and you are not at all worried about attracting a following, I'm not talking about a following on YouTube or a following on Facebook or a following on DVD. I mean a following, people who are actually coming to your site, they're reading your work, they're responding to it, they're offering ideas, they're hating it, they're loving it. If you're not getting or gaining that type of interaction from your consumers, from your fans, then you're failing. You're failing. If I hear any creator, and we hear this all the time, but they come to me and go, well, you know, I'm only creating this for myself, it's about the art. Well, you know what? You can make art by peeing in a jar. You can pee in a jar and say, hey, this is art. You know, but when you're creating content and you expect to get people to actually give up their time or money to enjoy what you created, then you damn well better be concerned about creating fans and entertaining fans. And so again, to answer that question, Tanibus, yes, the ego is the biggest issue. And yes, you should not be worried about otaku. You should be trying to get everybody. No problem. Yeah, you want to be getting everybody you can. That's the biggest thing you want to do. So with that being said, I think, you know, we're at pretty much the end of the game here. Let me first of all thank Sinclair Gray, Tanibus Draw, Stephen Alcade, Tanibus Draws there, who came in and agreed to do this. They have great communications in our PILOT Manga group, and so this discussion bore out of some of the great conversations and great comments both of them were making. We wanted to get more people, but we couldn't. But I want to thank everybody who witnessed this video. We had some great viewership numbers tonight. Saturday Q&A, again, is a video series that we do. So we've got actually some really big plans coming in the fall for this video series, the things that we'll do about this, everything from tutorials to specific sort of behind the scenes about creating webcomics and stuff. So I hope you guys stay tuned. Check out our YouTube channel. You can Google it pretty easily. It's www.saturday. Just Google Saturday AM and YouTube, and you'll find us. Again, you know, we are Saturday AM. My name is Frederick Jones. This is my company. This is the digital magazine and website that we produce. If you want to support us, just come to our website. We have free webcomics you can read every single day. We update Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday with original exclusive manga. Everything on Mondays we have Storybook by Andrew Sterling, followed by a repeat of Apple Black. Tuesdays we have a brand new manga this quarter called Comet Man by Frederick Ward. It's a fantastic superhero French teenage girl. Wednesdays we have Z Forever, which is a beautiful looking manga webcomic, followed by Saigami, a repeat of Saigami, one of our popular series. Thursdays we have two series. We have a brand new series called Remedium Plus, which we're really proud of. And again, it came out of our PILOT Manga community. And test runs, which test runs are kind of like an anthology webcomic, short stories where readers submit in their stories, and if it's successful, then we run it, and you guys can then vote whether or not we should do anything more with the creator or the comic. Fridays finishes up with Spoon and Bully Eater, which is one of our top, Bully Eater Repeat, which is one of our top comic books that we have. Saturday AM, again, this is our digital magazine. You can see here on the site, our latest issue is issue number 28. It features a cover from a new magazine we have called Saturday Plus, and that is where we take some of our top creators from PILOT Manga. We give them a chance to tell a story in the normal Saturday AM way. So Saturday Plus is coming back with some new series that you can have a chance to see the creators try to tell that story and see if they're growing as creators and if they're successful enough to move to afternoon WebX or Saturday AM. You can get the issue for just $1.99, but all of our issues for Saturday AM, you can get at least 20 of them per year by simply subscribing, and it's just $5 a year. $5 a year is the basic level subscription, and you get 20 issues Saturday AM. Features exclusive content like Apple Black, Bully Eater, Saigami, and Islanders by Leonardo Massa. But we've got some new series that'll be joining it, like Monster Society of America, and some other series, Clock Striker, and some other series we'll be announcing soon. So definitely check it out. All of our work is basically to try to bring more amateurs and more diverse content to the masses. So again, I want to thank everybody for tuning in and checking this out. Sinclair, you want to just any last word?
The only thing I'm gonna say is, if you're watching this, draw more manga. If you only have 5 minutes before you go to bed, at least draw a circle. Just keep drawing. Make time. Cut out TV. Do whatever you need to do.
I agree with that. And Tanibus, any last words from you?
Going on what Sinclair said, if you have a dream to draw a comic and or manga, just do it. Just do it. Don't put any excuses. Don't say it's too hard. Don't say I don't have enough time, because those are excuses. If you have enough time to watch TV, if you have enough time to play video games, you have enough time to create something. So get out a pencil, get out a notebook, write something, and then draw it. That's all I have to say.
Agreed. And again, I think again, we've got this great community called PILOT Manga. If you guys get a chance, feel free to check it out. It's www.saturday-am.com and /pilot-manga. You can check out some of our previous videos. You can read some articles about writing and so forth, and you can join us. So that's it, guys. Thanks again for checking this chat out, and we're going to talk to you guys soon. Take care.
All right. Thank you.
Back to the studio.